Hey everybody, welcome back to the Beach Theory. We got a suspenseful episode for you guys today.
Left the last one on a cliffhanger.
It was the most cliffhanger of all the episodes so far. Super suspenseful cliffhanger. Last episode we moved to Florida, and I was selling Cutco, working crazy hours, and it was very uncomfortable living in my parents' garage.
Yep.
And
But it was more comfortable for him because he wasn't home all day. He was
I was
gone,
working a lot,
exploring, working, like going seeing the world.
Hey,
and I
wasn't it wasn't fun and games. I was
it
working
wasn't.
my butt off.
He was working, but the thing is, and what I've learned since then, when I've worked a lot more since that point, it is a more fulfilling life when you're working outside of the home. Yeah. It just is. Because you kind of feel, I
would have tried places with you in a heartbeat.
You always said that, but I still think you would have felt so antsy wanting to get out and see the world and do other things. It wouldn't have satisfied you.
So there's something that we didn't talk about last week's podcast that I want to talk about before we get into what
the
everyone's
divorce
waiting.
letter.
You didn't identify it last time.
No, I didn't.
But now we know.
Now we know what it was.
Before we get into that, though, I want to talk on a more upbeat subject really quick. That really happened within the time frame of the last podcast story.
Okay.
That we didn't mention.
I have no idea what you're talking about, by the way.
In the last episode podcast, we moved to Florida.
Yes.
And I was selling Cutco.
Yes.
But we didn't talk about how we started our very first YouTube channel.
That's right.
Before.
And beekeeping at the same time.
Right. But, we talked about that.
That was horrible, by the way.
It didn't work out as well as we thought.
I
forgot about this.
Okay, wait. Let's just side story for really quick. Michael, we didn't have enough money to buy a package of bees, but we did have the equipment for bees because he had some before he had bought that stuff before his mission. So when we got back, we had the equipment, but no bees. But we had driven past this one house that we swore. It was on the way home. We swore we saw bees in it. It was an abandoned house in Florida that was overrun with plants.
To give you some background context, as a beekeeper, I'm always scanning the horizon for a swarm of bees that just might happen to be flying by that I can go and capture.
Yep.
And so as we were driving down this road, every time I drive down this road, I feel like I'm seeing these bees flying in a line, and I recognize it because I've been doing this long enough.
He's like, I swear I just saw bees over there.
I feel like there's something in this house, and it's an abandoned home. Let's just go check it out. So we park the car, and we go looking around this house.
Well, first, before we go looking around, I think that, did we go and check to make sure there were bees, and then we ran home and got all the equipment to get them?
Yes.
Okay.
So
can I just say from my perspective?
Yes, Cody.
Predicting that this won't end well.
You are right. You're correct.
So that's Cody Crab.
Maybe not for the reason you think, though.
Yes, he's our sound engineer here and peanut gallery commentator. So we went and got all of our beekeeping equipment, and we show up at the house to go and capture this swarm of bees, and they're really not a swarm. They're living in the house.
They have a hive that they have built into the abandoned walls of this house. We didn't ask permission to do that, by the way.
I remember looking up online to try to find out who owned the home.
Yeah.
And I think I determined that it was owned by a bank or something.
So we were like,
So we're like,
we can go steal some bees out of a wall.
No one's going to know.
We had to take part of the wall apart.
Somebody. I think I did call someone.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I do remember.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to be like, I didn't want to get in trouble or something. I
yeah.
do remember calling somebody, and they said, look, whatever you want to do, but don't sue us.
I was like, there's
hurt.
bees in the house. Yeah. So we get there, and we literally had to crowbar part of the wall off to get.
They were inside the wall.
They had built their hive inside the wall.
So we've got the suit on, gloves, hat and veil. We're totally covered from head to toe. There's no opening.
And somehow I get stung through my bee suit multiple times. They were Africanized bees.
These aren't kind
They were
Utah
not
bees.
normal. They were in Florida. They have Africanized bees, killer bees, Africanized killer bees. Those are the ones that see a predator and will swarm and sting hundreds of times until they die. That's the kind of bees we were like,
honeybees.
We're desperate. We want honey.
They are honeybees, but they're much more aggressive breed.
They were not full African bees, though.
No.
They were mixed breed, so they were very, very aggressive.
So honeybees, the Africanized killer bees, were brought into South America, and as they've migrated north, they've mated with the native bees, and because Africanized bees can't live in a colder climate, and so in order to be able to even survive in the cooler climate of Florida compared to Central America, they they inbred
Crossbred.
with other bees, and so they were more tame than real Africanized killer bees, but they were way more aggressive than any honeybee I've ever dealt with in my entire life.
It was horrible.
But I wanted bees, so we packaged this colony of bees.
We did it. We got those bees out of that house. We got stung billions of times.
Yep.
Not billions. I had probably at least 5 bee stings.
They were mean bees,
which is the most I've
They
ever
were
had with
angry.
him.
very
with his beekeeping.
aggressive, mean bees.
It was
And we took them home.
hard.
We put them in the backyard. And I remember every time I would go into the hive, I'd smoke it and I'd open it up and they would all start swarming around me, all
And
angry.
usually when you smoke bees, they calm
They're
down
really
because they
calm.
start eating their honey because they think their hive is on fire.
Yeah.
So they
It was just
normally
a
calm down.
whole different
Oh
energy.
my goodness. And you could tell they had a different feeling with them
Oh,
too. It was
yeah.
almost like, we're gonna kill
Mean.
you. Leave us alone.
Yeah, it was not good.
That was their message that we got from them.
So beekeeping offended me in Florida, and it just wasn't the same.
It offended you.
I was very upset
This
by that.
beekeeping has offended
Well,
me.
the thing is, I love bees.
Yeah, those were mean bees.
And they
It
hated
ended,
me.
It ended very
And
badly.
I was very sad about
And they
that.
didn't give us any honey at
No,
all.
none.
And I think they just left.
They did.
They didn't. We just went out there one day and they were all gone.
Yep.
They
were
just
gone.
swarmed and went away.
So, but
They're like, nobody's gonna control us.
we actually recorded that on our brand new YouTube channel. We actually started a YouTube channel in Florida, and we started filming like the dumbest videos you could ever imagine.
That were terrible quality, and you could barely hear what we were saying or see what we were doing.
But we have
It was
videos.
prehistoric, basically.
We have videos that all of these we took on our cell phone of James learning how to walk,
Yes.
and like
that
the
was exciting.
earliest videos
These were
ever.
keep in mind these were taken on a cell phone that were the longest video you could get was like 6 seconds.
No, 30 seconds.
30 seconds?
I think I could upload it up to a minute on YouTube at the time.
Okay.
YouTube was a different world back
It
then
was
too.
very different.
And also, I knew nothing about video editing and recording
Yep.
and production. And so, literally, we
Wow.
started a YouTube channel
that was
because
2010. No, 2011. That was 2011.
we started the channel because we were in Florida and Rebecca's family missed us. And we thought it might be a good opportunity for
Yep.
them to get to see what we were doing
Yep.
across the country.
And it was a good idea. But the thing is, we were like, wow, Mom just watched this 40 times. Whoa, how did the family watch this 100 times?
Yeah, we never imagined that other people would be watching
We never
our videos.
thought anyone else was watching it but our
We
family.
were just like, and then we call your family and be like, oh, so you watched this video a lot? And they're like, no, we never watched it once. And I was like, what the heck? Like,
hey, wait,
who
you
is
didn't even watch
watching-
it once? Hey,
who's watching our videos?
at least watch it once.
And,
Yeah.
and we weren't getting more than 100 videos
100
or 100 views. Or like if we got a video that had 100 views, we're like, oh my gosh, it's going viral. It's happening.
It's happening.
I think at the time we knew that like you could make money from YouTube. Like it was an option,
Yeah,
but
but it was in the beginning stages
but
of
we
really.
knew nothing about it.
getting to
And
do
we were
that.
just so new. We didn't really
Yeah.
put a lot of effort in either.
Well, we had other issues at
Yeah,
that
that's
time,
true.
which we're gonna get into right now.
Let's talk about it.
So, I was pushed to my wit's end. I didn't feel comfortable being in Michael's parents' house anymore. I just felt like I couldn't communicate the way that I communicated with my family.
And I felt bad because I could see you shutting down.
Oh, and I was seriously shutting down. Like, I wouldn't joke. I wasn't my typical self.
Yeah.
Like, if
And I
you
could
saw
see
me
that it was
then,
hurting you
like,
being
it was
there.
hurting me. It was
Yeah.
making me unhappy. It was not a good situation. And Michael, we had learned a lot from living in Oregon on the property in the wilderness with his family about what I could and couldn't handle. But that was a different story because now we had a house, we had running water, we had a bedroom, we had, a lot of the things that we didn't have then, but I still didn't have my mom nearby. I didn't have my family, who's a huge support to me and who I communicate with all the time and talk to all the time. And it just wasn't the same for me. And Michael was used to his family, but I wasn't. And I didn't know how to handle them. And we had different priorities. It was just so hard on me.
So you wrote a list, a letter.
So this was when your family was gone.
Yeah.
During the summer. And I was like, okay, I'm going to write this letter. And I'm going to close my eyes and try to remember what it said.
Did you write it in your journal or no? We don't have it anymore, do we?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think we do.
If I ever come upon that letter, oh
That'd be
my
crazy.
goodness. just to see exactly how I said it, because I did not sugarcoat it at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I said was, Michael, things have to change. You are working too much and you're not making enough money. You are not supporting your family. You are not listening to me when I say I'm not happy here. You keep brushing off whenever I say this is a problem or that's a problem, because it's not a problem to you. You don't justify it as a problem for me, even though it is a huge problem for me. James isn't getting the attention I think he should from you. You're gone too much. You're working so hard, but you're not making the money. It's not working. I'm about to have another baby, and I know you can't support us. I know you can't. Because if you don't change what you're doing, we won't have the food we need, and I'll have to go back to my parents. So this is your final warning. Change now, get a real job, or I'm going back to Utah, and we're not going to be together anymore.
Dun, dun, dun. That was scary.
Yeah.
Just listening to you say that now, I'm kind of scared a little bit.
Well, I'm sure it's bringing back some feelings,
Yeah. Well, I don't. Do you remember how I reacted? I don't remember specifically.
I set the stage pretty well, saying, hey, this is going to hurt. It's not going to be easy. I'm about to tell you you're not perfect, basically. I'm about to tell you that a lot of really hard things, but I don't want a rebuttal. In fact, I said this very clearly before. I said, do not fight me. Yeah. I have this list that I have written out, and I'm not joking. I'm so serious right now. If you try to fight me on any of these subjects, or if you try to defend yourself and keep going the way we're going, we're not going to be together. And I was just so serious and clear. Yep. Like, it was not working. Yep. It wasn't working. And I had my fill beyond my fill. You know what I mean? Like, working up on the property, that was hard. That was really difficult. And he agreed. Yeah. But the problem with this was it was hard and it was really difficult for me, and he didn't agree. He didn't think it was hard. He thought it was okay. It was.
But I could see that it was
hurting me.
I could see that it was hurting you, and I could see that some of the, feelings you were getting from my family were you could say abusive, toxic. It wasn't
toxic.
Good.
Yeah.
And
they weren't abusing me, but I am a very emotional person, and I pick up on a lot of people's emotions around me, and it wasn't good what was happening. Yeah. And I just couldn't handle it.
Yeah. I want to say I went out and got a job right away.
And if you were to say that, you would be right.
Okay. I just didn't want to say something. I'd be like, no, that is not how you reacted.
Well,
because I think that's how I reacted, but I don't remember exactly.
So what happened was you realized my seriousness.
Yeah, I did.
And you realized you were going to lose me.
And I knew that you were right.
Oh. That's sad.
You were right, though. You were absolutely right. And what you did was the right thing, because I wasn't listening to you.
No. And
I should have been.
A letter was the only way to just get across all my points. We were both very stubborn, and to bring up a conversation at that point in our marriage where everything was already stressful, he would just fight me or defend his stance, and it wasn't listening. It was, okay, but this, right. Always a rebuttal, always a
I remember being
defending himself.
I remember being really frustrated that you couldn't deal,
that I couldn't just be happy.
Yeah, I remember being frustrated because I was working my butt off and I wasn't making money I wanted to make. I remember being frustrated,
and I just wasn't satisfied.
And I was like, what do you want me to do?
What?
I'm a terrible salesman. I'm doing my best.
You were like, what more can I do?
Right.
You couldn't physically do more. You had
Right.
to do something different.
Right. And I remember being really frustrated that you were so mad at me and it was nothing that I could do to change.
So every time we brought up anything that I was unhappy with, he just shut me down
Well,
and said, be
'cause
quiet. I'm doing my best.
doing
Leave
as
me
best I
alone.
can."
Back off.
right.
Lay off me.
Right.
So
But after I got that letter, I think that was the point where I finally clicked in my mind and I said, okay, look, for the last year and a half, I've been doing sales jobs. I did door-to-door sales, selling security
let's
systems.
count.
I
Let's
sold
count.
Cutco. I did the door-to-door sales for Black Tie Research.
Yep.
I sold Isogenics,
And you sold Cutco again.
and I sold Cutco again.
That's
but
5.
right, sales jobs, and I was just not cutting it. I'm not
No.
a good
It
salesman.
never was good.
I tried my best,
You really did.
and I was not a good salesman.
And I think that was a hard hit when I gave you that
And you
letter.
said, look, go get a real job. You'll be making a lot more money
Yep.
just working 40 hours a week.
Yep.
And you'll get to see the family more.
Mhm.
We'll have a secure paycheck that's going to come no matter what because you work, period. And it was at that point that I was like, okay, I really have been dreading the thought of getting a real job. But if it would make us both happy and if it'll make you happier and we'll finally have the money we want, then I'm just going to buckle down and grow up and do it.
Let's be honest. You were not in love with a sales job. You were in love with the idea of what the best salesman in the company, what their job
With
was.
the freedom that
With the
comes
freedom.
with being successful.
With the money, with
Right.
the promises that never got fulfilled when you were actually doing it.
Right.
You were not necessarily in love with being a salesman. You were
Right.
in love with the
That's true.
idea of a successful salesman.
Absolutely. Right. I wanted the wild success, selling hundreds of
Man.
thousands of dollars and
Yep.
being the record breaker in the company. Like, I wanted that so bad, and I
Yeah.
worked so hard, and just
And
absolutely
it just
failed.
did not work.
But it's interesting now, though, looking back, because we can look back on all of our experiences and see how it was better, though, because of it. Like, because of that, it led me to go get a real job.
Oh yeah.
And that led me
You-
to the next thing.
You
which
are the
led
type of personality that you had to hit desperation before you made a logical choice.
Even now, I am.
You are. It's true.
Even now, it's like if I'm not feeling desperation, I don't work very hard. If I'm not like, oh my gosh, we have to do this and we have to do it right now,
Yeah.
and it's a character flaw. I recognize that, but I feel
It
like I'm
also
getting
works
better.
well for YouTube because YouTube changes all the time. So there's always desperation.
But anyway,
First thought.
but I could just see that there's been a progress. Like
Yeah.
these are lessons that I had to learn, and
Yeah.
I did, and I moved on, and I'm better for it.
Totally. Well, even just talking about this, I'm like almost about to burst into tears just because I gave him the letter and I wasn't joking when I was like I will divorce you. Like
No.
I from that point I gave him the letter and I watched him to see what he would do. If he chose to continue doing his sales job, I would call my parents and say, "Come get me. I'm done."
Yeah.
Oh. And if you chose to do what I said, what I was okay with, which was a real job, which would give us so much relief, then I would just stick it out. And I knew eventually it would be okay if you could make that change. And so I think it was the very next day you were like, okay, I'm done with with Isogenics. You're done with
Cutco.
every sales job,
Right.
but you're like, okay, I'm done with Cutco, and now I'm looking for a job. And we immediately went to a ward party, and at the ward party, the bishop of our church, he actually worked at the temple in Orlando, Florida, for our church, and he had he had a position open,
Yeah. And his wife said, hey, you should have Michael just volunteer.
yeah.
And if he does that, then he'll probably get hired.
Yep.
Just start working. And so I went to the bishop and said, hey, I need a job. I'm ready to start. Can I even just volunteer for a day and just show you how committed I am to making this happen?
And I didn't realize that's what you did. I didn't remember. All I knew was that I felt huge relief
Yeah.
because I love you.
And I love you.
And I loved you then. And I didn't want to leave.
The thing is, I remember when you gave me that letter, and I remember reading it, and I never for once thought, wow, we're going to get a divorce. Like, that thought never crossed my mind, because I wasn't willing to even consider that option.
Yeah.
And I knew that you loved me.
Yeah.
And I knew that as long as I was willing to do what it took to make you happy, that we'd be fine. And so I did.
And I wasn't like being a diva.
No,
I
you
wasn't
weren't.
being
You weren't at all.
greedy. I wasn't trying to like say, if it's not my way, it's the highway. Like, I wasn't being
No,
a
you weren't.
jerk.
You weren't at all.
I knew that it wasn't working what you were doing,
and I wasn't listening, and it was the only way you could get my attention.
And it wasn't only for me too. Like, I was seriously considering about how like the kids were being raised by me only, and how they didn't have clothes that they needed. They didn't have baby things that they needed. I was about to have a baby, and I didn't have 90% of the things that I needed to have a baby, because guess what?
We sold them all.
We sold them all in a yard sale.
Right.
So I was desperate. I was seriously desperate and thinking, I don't know how this is going to work. So you went, you volunteered, and you got that job.
Yep. Got hired right on the spot.
And it was the best. That was the change. That was the turning
point. Absolutely.
That was the turning point when you were like, I have to be more responsible.
Yep. I have to grow up.
It's time to grow up, basically.
I can't keep doing what I just want to do because I want to do it. I have to bite the bullet and get a job.
And part of that was me saying, I'm not going to let you do whatever you want to do from this point on, because now you have 2 kids and you got to deal with the consequences of it.
I didn't have 2 kids at the time, but about did.
Yeah.
It was close.
It was only a couple months after you got that temple job that we had Corbin.
You're right. But it was, and it was a good job.
And you loved it.
I honestly, I feel like I fall in love with any job that I have.
Well,
like let me rephrase that. Like, I can find joy in any job. I'm never going to be like, oh, I love going to work.
Yeah.
But I can be like, I have to work. That's not cool. Like, I hate this, but I at least have fun while I'm there.
Well, and I think a huge part of that was all of a sudden you had a paycheck. And it was a good one.
That felt really good.
You got a real paycheck. Yeah. And you were like, holy cow, what have I been doing with my life?
I was like, hey, this is really good.
And it keeps coming.
And it just keeps coming.
As long as you work, it keeps coming. And with sales jobs, that did not happen.
Yep.
As long as you worked, that didn't guarantee a thing.
That's right. And I really liked that job too.
Man, I feel like I'm going through all of these emotions all over again. Not to the extent by any means.
Like, kind of like in fast forward, like you're watching the movie.
Yes, but I'm like crying with my own emotions, and with laughing. My own memories. You know, like that. It was a hard time, and that was a hard. Even me, just getting to the point of having the realization that, oh my goodness, I can't be with him. Like, and that has to be an option for me. Otherwise, I'll go crazy.
Yeah,
and I will be unhappy for the rest of my life. That was a really hard realization. I cried a lot. When I wrote that letter, it was not an easy thing for me. Like, it was not like, I'm going to tell him. Like, it wasn't anything like that. It was like, this is how and I was like praying too. I was like, what do I say? What do I say? And I just felt like, tell him how you actually feel. Tell him what you're really experiencing.
Yeah.
All the things that he's not listening to, say it.
Yep. I'm glad you did.
I am too, or else there's no way we would be.
It needed to happen.
Honestly, I don't think we would be together, because we wouldn't have communicated.
Right.
We wouldn't have gotten to a point of communication where we could actually move forward.
Well, I'm glad you had enough love for me to stick with me as long as you did, and be willing to be patient through my learning process. You know, like we really do truly have real love for each other.
Yeah.
And that I was willing to say, you're right. I'm sorry, I've not been listening to you, and I need to change, and it's time for me to go get a job. And even though I didn't want to.
I knew he had listened to me after that letter, because all the previous times that I had tried to talk to him about these sensitive things, his reaction would be like, oh, and I'm going to defend myself, or, oh, I'm going to talk back. I'm going to have all these rebuttals. It was always rebuttals. But after that letter, he was silent. Just silent. And I made it very clear that's how I wanted it to be. I did not want him talking back to me. Don't you dare talk back. Like, I was just like, no. And so he just was silent, and I think we talked a little bit about a few things, and then he just walked away, and I think he had some quiet time to himself.
Yeah.
And
I probably prayed.
because he realized that how desperate the situation was. I just don't think that you ever realized how desperate this situation, how
Before reading the letter, is that
how
what you're saying?
severe,
Right.
how
Well, you're right.
upset I was, how I don't know what's a good word for it.
Serious.
How serious I was.
Well, right. And when I read the letter, it illustrated just how serious you were, and
Yeah.
it got me on the same page. I don't think I hesitated very much because I knew that I didn't want you to leave.
Yep.
And I still loved you, and I just had to grow up and get a job.
Yeah.
And I could do it. And I think I prayed just to be able to do that and to
Yeah.
have the strength to do it and move on.
Yeah. And up to that point, I think a lot of the blame, there was a lot of blame, I think, involved in not having success yet.
Yeah.
And I think some of that blame you would put on me and say, hey, you're not working. You have no right to complain.
Yeah.
You know, I'm the one trying to make the money here. So you can't, if he has a very hard time, like if he's the one working and I'm correcting his working, he can't handle that. That's like, how dare you correct me when you're not even working?
Yeah.
But I was I was sick again, being pregnant by that time with Corbin, and I had a toddler, and I was home all day because I had to be. We had to have somebody watch the baby, and Michael's family wasn't up for that.
Yeah.
So it was me, and he was still in this mindset of, it's not fair, I have to work and you don't. But I was like, yes, I do. I have a baby I'm taking care of, and I'm sick all the time.
But working at the temple was a great job. I just remember how much I really enjoyed working with my bishop.
It was a night and day change in our relationship and in our personalities, our happiness.
Yeah. I remember, so I'd go to work at like 6 o'clock in the morning.
I'm even sighing right now because I feel like it's just the relief is coming back to me too. And I was like, all the stress, all the worry, all of
You're really reliving those emotions.
Ah.
Like you really are.
See how emotional I am? See how empathy, that's a thing for me. Like I'm having empathy for myself at that time and for you and that was hard. Anyways. Temple.
I remember
it was a good job.
Yeah, I'd go to work at like 6 o'clock in the morning or something, or 5:30 or 6.
Yep.
And I remember the first thing we'd always do is we'd read a chapter from the scriptures,
which was awesome.
And I was on the grounds
At any
crew.
job.
Like I didn't work inside the temple. I worked outside. I worked on keeping the gardens and picking
Power
up trash
washing,
and pulling weeds and trimming the hedges.
leaf blowing.
Yeah. And like it was hard manual labor every day, but we'd always start off the day by reading a chapter from the scriptures together.
Yep.
And then we'd talk about what we're going to do that day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, yes, it was hard manual labor, but it was like peaceful and serene because we were on the temple grounds all day, and it's just gorgeous, beautiful. On YouTube, I'll have to put an image of the Orlando temple where I worked every single day. Yep. And it was just like we were living in the Garden of Eden and working and building
and
this
feeling the
beautiful
spirit
place.
of God, and like you just felt it was a very serene, good job.
It was really
what a good job for you to have picked for your first official real job, right?
It was a great job. Like even looking back, I have fond memories of that job and the good times that I had with the coworkers that I had there, and like we had good times.
Yep. Lots of funny stories that we don't want to talk about.
There's only one specifically that you'll never forget.
But you had a good time every day. You came home in a good mood.
And I would come home at like 2:30.
Yeah.
Because I'd go to work really early. I'd come home really early, and I'd have like the whole day, and we could go to the beach, or we could do fun stuff. What a relief.
That was a huge change from 70 hours a week, not ever seeing him.
It was awesome.
Oh, man. It was great.
Yeah. But I think that's it for today's podcast.
Yes.
So tune in next week. We're going to talk about Corbin and the whole healthcare system of Orlando, Florida.
Oh my goodness.
And
you keep reminding me about all the drama in my life. I'm like, holy
cow.
Are
like big things.
You know what's funny though? I really am the type of person, you wouldn't know it from this podcast so far, let me just say that, but I am the type of person that I will experience something hard and put it past me and move on.
Right.
I won't focus on it. I won't use it as a crutch. I'm not constantly saying, oh, I can't move forward in my life because this terrible thing happened to me.
Right.
Like that is not me.
Yep.
So to relive these things is actually kind of difficult for me. It's not comfortable. Yeah. It's not normal for me. So just know that even though in this podcast it seems like I'm complaining all the time or I'm unhappy all the time, that's actually not how it is.
So next week, we're going to be talking about Corbin and his birth and the whole doctor's experience. And that was a whole ordeal in and of itself. But
and a big reason why we decided it was time to move back
to Utah.
Yep.
So we'll talk about all that next week. Make sure to stay tuned. Subscribe on YouTube if you're watching Beach Theory on YouTube, or you can follow us anywhere you find podcasts.
Yes, and the reason why you'd want to watch our YouTube channel for Beach Theory is we're going to be inserting pictures and little videos that we started at that time, YouTube videos.
Every episode.
Yes.
I want to do it on every episode.
So make sure to watch those because it's a really good detailed history of our life.
Or if you listen, that's fun too.
Yes.
So Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
Anywhere that you can
Anchor,
find a podcast.
We are there.
Yes.
And having so much fun doing it.
Oh, I just had a single tear pop out of my eye from this conversation.
Cute.
Randomly.
Let me wipe that for you.
Thanks. I think you just smeared it.
That's what wiping is. All right. Thanks for watching, you guys. We'll see you guys next week.
All right. Bye.
Bye.